was one of the very first, the second actually, individuals to embody the Lord Humongous character. Had a tremendous run, albeit brief, in a couple of territories, most notably Mid-South. And we're going to get into all of that with Mr. Jeff Van Camp in just 1 minute. But before we get into the questions, as per custom and tradition, I have to throw to my partner, the man who is Mr. Cheap Heat himself. It's his show, Morris Shortle. Morris, how are you tonight, sir?
Good. I'm actually kind of forgetting now that I can run these shows as well because I've upgraded my internet in Ireland. But we'll keep it going. It's entertaining the way we do this thing.
Well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Jeff, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for letting me be here. Appreciate it.
But before we get into some of the particulars of your career and your run, I find the fans appreciate if, as a baseline, we talk about how did you become involved initially in terms of the pro wrestling business? Were you a fan growing up, or how did that develop?
Actually, I wasn't a real big fan growing up. I played football for University of Louisville. And every Tuesday night, the wrestling with Jerry Lawler and that group used to come to Louisville Gardens. And that's how I got to know the wrestlers. And Jerry Lawler, at one point, after a couple of years, he invited me and my friend named Pete Bowen to be a part of the wrestling organization. He had a gimmick that he wanted to try out on us. And at the time, it was before the Road Warriors. And he actually invited me and Pete to go to Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis, Tennessee to learn how to wrestle. So we made up a point to come down one winter Saturday afternoon, and we drove down. Actually, Pete, he got kind of chickened out, cold feet at the last minute. So my brother Russell and I drove to Memphis, went to Mid-South Coliseum and met Jerry at the stadium. And then he actually got me and my brother up in the ring for about 3 hours. And he invited my brother to wrestle, and my brother turned it down because he said he couldn't do it. So I got in the ring, and he taught me how to work the wrestling for about 3 hours. And he handed me a booking sheet and says, "Okay, now you're a wrestler."
Wow. That was the entirety of your training process?
That was it. That was totally it. In Mid-South Coliseum, 3 hours with Jerry Lawler in Mid-South Coliseum. That was it. Wow. He handed me a booking sheet and said, "Okay, now, Jeff, you're a professional wrestler." I was like, wow. I was totally green. I had no idea what I was getting into.
How did that come about then? How did Jerry, how did the conversation come about? Like, did he meet you? You were a fan at the shows and he met you, or how?
Well, what happened was they had wrestling every Tuesday night at Louisville Gardens, and they would hire football players as security officers to walk the wrestlers to and from the ring to protect them. And that's how I got to know these guys. They said, "Damn, man, you're a pretty big guy. I want you to be a wrestler." And I had dreams of going to the NFL myself, and I busted my right knee out on ACL damage. So that ended my dreams of going to the NFL. So I took him up on the offer to be a professional wrestler.
Wow, that's quite a story. Did you, when you commenced your in-ring portion and performing, I noticed you worked with at the some of your initial matches anyway was with Dennis Condrey, and
sure did.
You were right up there in that Mid-South Coliseum at a time when they were selling out all the time. How intimidating was that for you to be stepping in the ring to that particular venue?
It was very intimidating for me because I had never done anything like that before. It kind of, playing football, we had big stadiums. So, I mean, I was used to the audience, but I just wasn't used to being the spotlight. And a lot of guys like Dennis helped me out tremendously. And another person, I don't know if you remember Buddy Landell or not.
Absolutely. Nature Boy.
I did not have a pair of wrestling boots. All I wore was high top tennis shoes, my football shoes. And buddy, I was working with him a few shows, and he kind of got with me in Nashville, Tennessee, and said, Jeff, I got a pair of boots I think that will fit there. They're too big for me. So he gave me he gave me my first pair of wrestling boots. Buddy Landell did. I'll never forget that.
Wow. In terms of your since you were basically, or not basically, but by today's standards, training on the job, can you talk us through, after you were told by the king, you're a wrestler now, here's a booking sheet, go to it. What went through your mind when you first walked out there with the emphasis on yourself, not in a team environment, but as an individual wrestler? How in the world did you get through that first couple of matches, given the fact that it was alien to you?
Oh my gosh, I was so green, and I know they were yelling potato a lot because I at first I didn't realize. I mean, I was really stiff, and they had to teach me to be not so aggressive and just listen and learn. The guys in the ring would talk to you and tell you what you need to do, and you had to listen. That's one of the things that I think that I really helped me out with the guys and the fellas, is that they knew that I was really willing to learn, and I listened to them, and I learned a lot. Like Dennis, he was a wonderful individual. Robert Ricky Gibson, I don't know if you know Robert, and his brother was, man, you talk about fantastic. Bill Dundee was really great to me. And I remember I hopped on the scene when Jerry Lawler was doing that big skit with Andy Kaufman. So, I mean, at one point, I had my car broke down, and I was in a little town in Kentucky, and I walked in the restaurant, and there said Andy Kaufman. He knew who I was because I'd worked a couple shows with him. And he actually bought me dinner, and we sat down and had a nice conversation, Andy Kaufman and I.
That's something it's really fortuitous that you brought that up, because of course that angle is legendary, and some of the in my opinion some of the best stuff Memphis ever produced. Were you aware when that angle was going on? Were you smartened up to the fact that Lawler and Kaufman were of course cooperating in this? Or because one of the major facets of that angle that I've read was they didn't people weren't really smartened up as to how that was playing out.
Actually, at the time, I really didn't understand what was going on, because I was totally brand new to the business, and I think a lot of the guys didn't want to smart me up until they actually learned who I was going to be and how far I was going to get. But at the time, when I sit down and talk to Andy at the dinner table, and what a down to earth, great guy he was. I mean, he offered to take me to Memphis. At the time, I was waiting for my mom and dad to drive from Indiana down to Kentucky to pick me up, and then they helped me out. But Andy, he probably sit there with me for 2-3 hours. We just sit and talked, and what a great guy. And I was totally new, and for him to take time out of his busy schedule just to visit with me and smart me up to the business, it was really a nice treat.
Mm-hmm. Were you there during the famous match that Lawler and Kaufman had that ended with the double the back suplex and the double pile driver deal?
When he went to the hospital, I didn't work that night, but I was there. I get to see a lot of great things. That was amazing. I mean, what a great gimmick. I mean, it was he sold it to everybody believed it. It was wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Jeff, can you talk about your tag team with with Dick the Bruiser, and how that came about, and how you got to work with someone of his level with your little experience at the time?
It's amazing. His brother, his son-in-law, Stormy Granzik, and I met with him, but it was I forgot his name now. I'm so sorry. His son-in-law was working in the Memphis territory, and Jerry at the time told me that, Jeff, your time is running short. You're gonna have to go to another territory. That's pretty much how they tell you to move on. So he got with me and said, Jeff, my father-in-law is Dick the Bruiser up in the Indianapolis, Chicago area, WWA. He said, "Why don't you come up there and I'll introduce you?" So that's how I got to go up and meet Dick the Bruiser and Abdullah the Butcher and Jimmy Valiant and all those wonderful guys, Bobo Brazil, and all those great guys. And I was still learning. I was probably 6 months into it by the time I went up to Indianapolis. And Road Dogg, his other son-in-law, and then it was just one of the, it's like I fell in line at the right place at the right time. And that's how I got to meet a lot of the people. And Dick really liked who I was and what I stood for. I was a big guy, and that's how he, after he saw me, how I was working, how I was learning, and he came to me one afternoon after one of the shows we went to, I think Hammond, Indiana, and said, "Jeff, you and I are going to be tag team champions." I said, "Okay." So that's, I was totally amazed, and what a great honor it was to work with him.
Mm-hmm. In terms of your Alabama, and that was, correct me if I'm wrong in terms of the research, but that was when you were given the Lord Humongous gimmick as kind of a henchman for Robert Fuller. Can you talk about how that came about and what your initial thoughts were to that particular character for you?
Sure. After that, I was up in Indianapolis, Chicago area for about 7-8 months. And when I was working as security for the wrestling with Jerry Lawler, I got to meet Austin Idol and all those wonderful guys. They used to travel with us, my brother and I. We used to drive them to and from Evansville, Indiana, and a lot of spot shows in Kentucky. So that's how I got to know Austin, and he knew I was working as a wrestler, and he knew I was a pretty big guy. And when I was working up in Chicago area with Dick the Bruiser for about 6-7 months, I got a phone call. We didn't have cell phones back there, so I would call my house every once in a while and talk to my mom and dad. And one evening I called, and my mom said, "Jeff, just let you know, Austin Idol called you and wanted you to call him right away." I said, "Okay." And so he had his phone number. So I ended up calling Austin. And Austin is the one who actually told me about him and Jerry Lawler had made a connection with me during when I was working with him about Mike Stark was a guy named Lord Humongous, and he gave it up. He didn't want to do it no more. And they thought it would be a great gimmick for me to be that persona, because I was big. And I said, okay. So I got with Dick the Bruiser, made my departure in WWA, and I came down to Mid-South in, I believe, August of 85 or 84.
Was that where did Robert Fuller fit into this and your role as his henchman?
Well, actually, Ron Fuller, he owned the territory. Him and Bob Armstrong. Bob had a percentage in the stake of the territory, Continental. And it was amazing. I'd never met Ron before. He's pretty big. He's taller than I. He's 6'9". He's a big man. And you talk about a gentleman, wonderful, wonderful guy. He allowed me. Actually, when I moved down to Pensacola, Florida, I stayed with Austin for about 3 weeks before I actually went into the ring as Lord Humongous. I had to get the uniform and everything made up. I get my boots ordered from Bill Ash from Arkansas. You remember Bill? I got the boots from Bill Ash, and his father and his family made the boots. I got the gimmick up, and Austin pretty much gave me the instructions on how to be Lord Humongous. You know, you enter the ring, you step over the ring, you don't go in like everybody else. Everything you do, because you do everything totally different. You don't do anything like a regular wrestler. You wear a belt, you don't wear a belt around your waist. You put a chain, you get a chain, you put it around your neck. Anything, you're a monster, and you have to portray that gimmick as a monster, and that's exactly how I portrayed Humongous. And one of the things I'll never forget, Austin always told me, he said, "Listen, Jeff, if they ever find out who Lord Humongous is, the gimmick is dead. You might as well throw away the hockey mask, get rid of the gimmick, because the gimmick is dead. So protect the gimmick as much as you can, and never allow anybody to see your face." And I don't know if you remember Steve Williams at Mid-South, Dr. Death Steve Williams.
Yes, sir.
Well, he wrote a book. And in that book, he even said, if you knew who Jeff Van Camp was, you would never think he was Lord Humongous, because he's a totally different persona when you enter that ring. And when you go into the ring, you have to, you that's who you portray. It's like an entertainer. They're portrayed of whoever they want to be in on the stage, and that's who you have to portray, and that's who I portray myself as, a monster, Lord Humongous.
What kind of measures did you have to go through then outside the ring to protect your character? Were you going around like wearing hoods a lot of the time and kind of sneaking?
Actually, I did. Going about a mile or two from the building or where I was wrestling, I wore a black hood. So I put a black hood over my face, and that's how I drove to and from the ring to the building where I was the venue. And then when I left, I had to took my hood out, and I took off driving with that as well. Now I had to be very careful because I had a lot of people following me. In Jackson, Mississippi, when I was working with Jake the Snake, I got stabbed by a fan. I still have the scar on my right hand today from being stabbed. On the way back from Pensacola at the auditorium downtown, I always had to take at least an hour out of my way to get back to the house because I had so many people follow me. I got shot at. I got ran off the road. I got stabbed. So there's a lot of things I had to do to protect my gimmick and protect myself. That's the reason why I had really hardly any family members at all coming to the ring. One time my brother showed up in Florence, Alabama. He was coming down to visit me. And actually he paid his money to went into the Bower Auditorium and paid money to come see me. And then I let him come in backstage after, they talked to security. But I tried to protect my gimmick as best I could. And it was dangerous at sometimes being a heel, believe it or not.
Very. You jogged my memory about something that I wanted to ask you about in terms of I don't know if you pay attention to the current product at all from the big companies, but when you mentioned you were taught how to work as a big man, does it irk you, or do you shake your head when you see some of the few remaining truly giants that we have left in the industry not wrestling like a big man? For example, a guy like Brian Cage wrestling Tessa Blanchard and selling for her. So that's the first part of the question. The second part, does it also irk you when you see wrestlers today totally getting rid of and not respecting kayfabe or their gimmick, thanking each other on social media and totally destroying any sort of veil of kayfabe?
There's two parts of that question. The second part, I totally get irked about that, because you really, if you want to protect your gimmick and protect who you are, like I was doing, you have to kayfabe. You have to. And as far as big man, there's certain ways that a big man should be, like Andre the Giant. He portrayed himself as a giant, and he was a giant. Big John Studd, all those big guys, Road Dogg, they're all big guys. And you can't take bumps like a normal wrestler can. You take bumps like a giant, like a monster. And it does irk me when I find big guys falling down. It's just not the way it should be. They should learn the right way.
And perhaps that's emblematic again of the lack of psychology in the business today, because it seems to me that if you're utilizing proper ring psychology, that you wouldn't be falling all over the place or selling for someone who's 150 pounds less and six inches shorter.
No.
Do you by chance watch any of the major companies and see how the product is presented today?
I've watched a little bit of it. I don't watch it all the time, but because I get so, like you said, irked about how they're portraying the gimmick and not being kayfabe and not understanding. I think there's a big following of people really want the way wrestling used to be, and I understand that, because there was like a persona of how it used to be. Because take for instance, when we was leaving Jake the Snake in the middle of the ring, and he was, after I gave him a headbutt, he was on the ground in the middle, and here comes Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and he hops in the ring. Now, instead of taking a powder, jumping out of the ring as fast as you can, I stood my ground and stood over and like, what are you going to do? And I got a little heat from Bill Watts for doing something like that, but I agree that I'm a big monster. Why am I going to be intimidated by, even though he's a big man, I got to sell him. You understand? I did sell him, but I got out of the ring the way I wanted to get out of the ring, not take a powder and fall down and scoot. You know what I'm saying? I grabbed that ring and went over the top rope and stepped over like a monster should. Like, I'm not going to be afraid of you. I'm going to see you again. And a lot, they don't do that nowadays. I don't understand why. And they, if you want to sell shows, like we went up to with Ron Fuller, I was a heel, and all the whole group, when they saw me, had a hockey mask. And when you talk about being over, when you walk into the ring and all the kids have hockey masks on, and I'm a bad guy, that means you're over. Everybody loved it, and I enjoyed it, and that's one thing. When I never did an interview, I never spoke. I spoke with my eyes. I opened my eyes up, and I had several different managers, Saul Creechman, and of course Humperdinck was fantastic. And let me tell you a little story about Humperdinck. I don't know if he was the ugliest man I ever met in my life, but he was so smart to the business. And let me tell you something, that man got more women than you can shake a stick at. I don't understand it. He was the ugliest and didn't have the best shaped body in the world, but that man got some women, that's for sure.
Nice.
Must have been the floral shirts.
It must have been, man. But he was a talker. He was most definitely a talker. What a great guy.
Jeff, how was it working with a young Arn Anderson, and did you think he'd go on to have the Hall of Fame standard career that he did?
I talk to Arn every once in a while. Arn says, Jeff, if you just stayed in the business 2 or 3 more years, you would have been in the Hall of Fame with me. And even Jake Roberts said, Jeff, I wish you would have stayed in it just a couple years more. He said you would have had a run with Andre. They would have put you with him and Hulk. They would have put you with all the big guys, because that's exactly where I needed to be. But at the time, I didn't think about it. I wanted to get out. I was married, and I wanted to start a family, and that was my decision. I wish now because I went back in the ring for 30 years off and on to do reunion shows, and that's where I get to meet Terry Gordy from the Freebirds and Michael Hayes. I worked with those guys. They were fantastic. But it's kind of sad. 3 weeks after I worked with Terry Gordy, he passed away suddenly, and I'll never forget that. He was a wonderful guy. He was kind of at the time he mentally. I don't think he was all there, but because I had to really work with him in the ring. And then I learned 3 weeks after I worked with him, he passed away, and I felt very bad about that.
Yeah, what a tremendous talent. Speaking of Horsemen, though, in '85, you wrestled, you received NWA World title shot against Ric Flair.
I sure did.
How did that come about? And my goodness, for being, new to the business, what a stamp of approval from the office that must have been for you.
Oh my gosh, I was so honored. I was so honored. I think Rick wanted to do it as much as anybody, because he got with Ron, and at the time I was really helping selling out the big tournament everywhere. I was selling places out like crazy, and Ron he just gave me an opportunity. He said, Jeff, I got something I want you to do, and I want you to work with Rick. Now he did warn me. He said, "Now let me tell you something. Don't expect no 15 to 30-minute ring. You're going to be in that ring for an hour with Rick." I went, "Oh my God, you got to be kidding me! An hour?" So sure enough, we was out there I worked with him in Birmingham. Let me tell you, it was so many people in Birmingham. It was a sellout crowd. It was unbelievable. We had people in the rafters, and they would not. It was like a disqualification, but the audience did not want me to leave that ring unless I had his belt. So I walked out of that ring with Ric Flair, the World Heavyweight Championship belt.
What was I saw that match a long time ago, but what was the finish? A DQ or how did that go exactly?
Yeah, I think it was. I believe, I believe it was a disqualification on his part, but then the people were so angry and upset with him that I had to literally walk out of that ring with the belt. And then I worked with him again the following night. We was in Montgomery, Alabama. So he ended up winning the belt back in Montgomery. But it was a great time, man. Because a week before, when Rick was there, a month or so, I traveled with the champ, and he most definitely could put down some alcohol, that's for sure.
Still to this day, was that your first 1 hour Broadway?
Yes, sure was.
Wow, against Ric Flair. Not many people say that. Wow.
I was very honored. A lot of people don't realize that, but I worked with him for an hour, 2 nights in a row. Monday night and then a Tuesday night. It was fantastic.
Do you still follow him these days? Do you see what he does be up to? Rick partying, etc. He just be in the news for a lot of the wrong reasons, kind of unfortunately at the moment.
Yeah, and he had a lot of health issues as well, and I feel for him because he treated me very nicely, and I'll have great memories of Rick. So I wish him only the best in the future.
He can still party. That has to be admired as well.
Yes, sir, absolutely. He can drink some beer, brewskis, that's for sure.
Next, you commenced the penultimate run with Mid-South. Wanted to ask you how you got to be booked there, and I'm sure you do, any significant stories of working for the legendary cowboy Bill Watts.
It was amazing when I at the time Bill Dundee had contacted me. I got with Ron. Ron said, Jeff, if you want to leave, you had a great run here in Southeastern Continental. If you want to leave and go for better horizons for your future, be my guest. And he gave me the blessing. So actually, Bill Dundee, after he gave me the blessing, Bill Dundee called me, and he was working out of Charlotte, North Carolina at the time, and he was the booker. And I had contacted, I think it was Bill Watts had actually called me, and he said, Jeff, come on over here. I want to work with you. I said, no problem. So he put me on a plane out of Pensacola, and I flew up to Shreveport, and then he put me up in a nice hotel, picked me up in a limo, took me to the boys club, and right there out of Shreveport, and wrestled. And that's when I worked with Dick Murdoch. Remember Dick, what he did for me?
Captain Redneck, yep.
Oh, my God, man. You talk about a great guy. I'd never met Dick Murdoch before in my life until that period of time. And he said, Jeff, I don't know if he got with Bill. I don't know what the deal was, but he put me over like I was a monster I was in that ring on TV, and I'll never forget that. He was fantastic. I couldn't thank him enough. I bought him so much beer after that. He was a drinker too, but boy, I tell you what, I couldn't thank him enough. And that's when when I walked in the locker room and saw what the people and guys were doing to themselves and their bodies. That's when I really knew I was in big time wrestling, and it woke me up real fast.
Were you witness to any of the legendary displays of, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say temper, but Watts was, quite well known for angry discussion, so to speak, in the locker room. Were you ever on the receiving end of that, or did you witness any of that?
I witnessed it one time. Now, Bill did get extremely pissed off, and he was angry as hell at me. Actually, he held back 2 weeks of my last paycheck because I was actually going to another territory. That's what made me decide to quit. But he got angry. Oh my God! It was him. When John Nord, remember me and Barbarian, when he turned against Jake in the ring, and then after we did our stunt with Jake, the next week we was on TV with a couple, Tim Constance and Tim Curry or something, I believe. and we did something, and he wanted to put those two kids over baby faces really, really big, really, and wanted us to kind of bow down to him. And John and I said, man, we're monsters. We ain't gonna let these little kids push us around. So we went out there and fucking destroyed them. Excuse my language. We destroyed them. And Bill came back, and he was so pissed off at John and I. It was unbelievable. After that, within a few, maybe a month or so, John had left Mid-South and went. He told me he was giving up wrestling altogether, and I found out he went to WWF as the Berserker. But he totally left Mid-South after that. Bill, he was so angry. He was throwing shit in the locker rooms. Unbelievable. He was so mad, angry.
Was it an urban legend or a fact from speaking of the locker room that Watts said that, you know, you can go out and drink and fight and do whatever you need to do on your off time, but if you lose a fight, you're fired. Was that communicated to you as well? That's
pretty much it. Yeah, if you because a lot of people didn't really know who I was, so I was kind of protected a little bit. But if you go out in these bars and get in a fight, you better win.
Yeah.
You better win at all costs. You better win.
How did you deal with the Mid-South travel schedule then, Jeff? Or did that ultimately come to your decision to leave then as well? Was that a big factor in it?
It was a little bit. We traveled. It was 7 days a week, and we worked twice on Saturdays and Sundays. Now you had to have a wife or a girlfriend at the time, because at the time I had a young wife, and thank God she knew how to drive, because she would drive us to Houston, Texas, and a week later pick us up in Jackson, Mississippi, or New Orleans at the airport.
Did you find that that travel deal got, to my understanding of Mid-South, when you were there, business was starting to fall off a little bit, and then eventually the sale to Crockett. Did you find that the travel got more difficult with the declining revenues, and those trips to those tremendous car rides got more and more difficult to handle?
It did. It was like further and further and further away. And I remember Thanksgiving night in '85, we worked in the Superdome, and that's the night that I worked with Jake the Snake, Butch Reed, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and we were the main event. So, and Bill Watts had a gimmick that he used a cattle prod, and it's supposed to put it in my eye, and I take the mask off and all that. But anyway, that was the same night the Crockett Productions were doing the same thing. It's like an alternate show. We're going back and forth. Then it was a sellout crowd in the Superdome. And I didn't even have time. We literally left the ring, put me on a golf cart, drove me to the locker room as fast as I can. My manager at the time, Humperdinck, was already back there in the back. He had my stuff ready for me in my duffel bag. We ran out the door as fast as we could, hopped in the limo, went to the airport, and flew. It was me, Hacksaw, Butch Reed, all those guys, and went on Bill Watts' Learjet and flew to Shreveport and wrestled again. I was so wore out that night, but it was an amazing time, that's for sure.
Did you ever have an opportunity or think about joining the WWF at any point? Was there ever any discussions there?
Actually, I was out. Later on, I should have went. I wish I could have went, but there was no discussion at the time when I decided to hang it up and start a family. I just walked away at the time when I was on the top of the world to start a family.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You've touched on some of your legendary opponents that you had in Mid-South, and I just wanted to give you an opportunity to do when I throw a name out, your impression of working with them. You already talked about Captain Redneck Dick Murdoch. What about working with Hacksaw Duggan in the ring? Another big guy, not a monster, but still a big guy.
Jim was a fantastic worker. I enjoyed working with him tremendously. He was a great guy, and I know he's having little health problems at this time. I wish I could get back in contact with him like I do with Jake. I believe it or not, Jake and I stay in touch all the time, and we go fishing every once in a while. Every once in a while, we just go. I'll hop on a plane and go out. We went to Minnesota a couple years ago, and then last year or so we went to Oklahoma and did some fishing. So Jake's he's a really good friend of mine, and they were wonderful guys. I mean, I can't tell you enough about even in the ring. Like I remember one time on Halloween night, we went to it was me and Dr. Steve Williams, and Hacksaw Jim Duggan was we were friends with Steve, and we went over to his house and had a little party after we got done working. It was fantastic. I think it was in Hammond or Lake Charles, Louisiana, when we went to after we got done working, we went to Jim's house for a Halloween party, and it was fantastic. So
tremendous. What about Butch Reed, who you've also touched on, a guy who really, in a lot of old school fans' opinion, should have been a world champion?
I agree with that wholeheartedly. Butch and I worked together. We was in a little area up in Oklahoma, an Indian reservation, and it was a packed out crowd at a high school auditorium, and Butch and I worked, and you talking about it, a great worker, soft. He put it, everybody had their own stuff they had to go through, and of course you only had to do what you had to sell the gimmick. But he was fantastic. He should have been world champion without a doubt.
Mm-hmm. And a guy that you worked in a couple of territories, another individual that's considered to be very underrated across the board, and that's Al Perez.
Oh, Al Perez, yeah, boy, I tell you what, I didn't really work with Al that much. I was in the dressing room with him several times, like Wendell Cooley and Al Perez. They were fantastic. They were great guys in the locker room, great to have company and talk with and hear their stories of what they went through in the ring, and to the road and stuff. But he was a great guy. Al Perez is a wonderful, wonderful person in my book.
Mm-hmm. And another name, Terry Taylor, that you had some interactions with in Mid-South.
Yeah, Terry was actually after there was an individual, I can't remember who was the booking, but Dick Slater was the booker, and then after Dick, that's who I contacted in Mid-South, I believe, and then Terry took over as the booker, and Terry and I didn't get along too well. I met Terry when I was with Joey Lawler in his territory. And Terry is most definitely a womanizer, and he and I just didn't get along. And it showed when he started. I think he's one of the main reasons why I left the business, because of his demeanor.
In terms of being a reported office stooge or morality issues?
Oh, both. I mean, everything you said, you had to, you got your backstabbers everywhere you go, and he's one of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, you're not alone in that assessment for sure. You touched on your great relationship to this day with Jake the Snake, and most fans from that era remember that extensive program that you had with him. You had cage matches, you had you name it. What was it about your tenure in the ring with Jake that made that chemistry so palpable?
Jake, honestly, he's a great worker, and he and I just we clicked. When you work with somebody and you know what they're going to do, and he knows what I'm going to do, we just automatically knew we just clicked. No matter what we did, we were together on all our moves and everything that he did. I knew what he was going to do, and he knew what I was going to do, and he's a great professional individual, and I'll never forget it. We just clicked.
Jeff, what's your thoughts on other people using the Lord Humongous gimmick, in particular? Probably the fans would like to know about Sid Vicious.
I heard a lot of bad things about Sid. I understand he did a lot of steroids. I don't know if any of this is true. I've just heard from what people have told me, and he didn't really know how to work the gimmick, and I understand. It kind of upset me when I went out and had a mystique of Humongous and how I thought it should have been worked. And a lot of fans in the last few years said, Jeff, when you walked in as Lord Humongous, everybody believed of who you were, and they didn't believe it with anybody else. It makes me feel good. They just didn't have the same persona or mystique of Humongous as I think I did. And it kind of upsets me because I worked so hard at making a good name for myself with the Humongous gimmick. And now a lot of people, like this one individual, I get a lot of, this one guy up in Mississippi, I don't really want to say his name, but he does a lot of the Humongous gimmicks. And instead of putting a picture of himself on the brochures, he'll put a picture of one of my old pictures of Lord Humongous on the, and he'll sell, and they'll sell tickets thinking it's me, Lord Humongous, and he'll take credit for it, and that hangs.
That should be called out.
It should be, and I called out a couple of the promoters at the time when they said, "Listen, I'm not coming to your show. You need to stop showing a picture of myself on your posters because that ain't cool. Billboards or whatever you want to do." That's a picture of me, not the person that's going to persona of Humongous who you're paying. So,
have you ever reached out to any of these? I know this is wrestling, and there's a lot of copycats, and you think of most notably all the doinks that there have been throughout the years, etc. But have you ever reached out to one of these dudes that are stealing your gimmick? No doubt about it, and said, cut this out, or do you have any? I take it you don't have any legal hold on the intellectual property, but still.
At the time when I was in it, actually, I was thinking about doing a patent of the Lord Humongous gimmick, and at the time, I was new and I didn't actually have the money to do the patent. I wish I would have done it now. But I do get really upset at people who portray Humongous and put on a hockey mask and outfit that I used to wear, and they portray themselves and they don't have a clue what they're doing. And just really, it upsets me. It's just like someone going out there saying they're Jerry the King Lawler, and it's not. And people know that's not the same person, but they're just trying to sell and make $1 off someone else's name. That's not right.
Aside from Sid, I was going to ask you about up in Calgary. They had Jason the Terrible, who wore the hockey mask. A little bit of a tweak in terms of the outfit. Carl Moffat. Did you ever catch his work as Jason?
No, I sure didn't. I'm sorry. I've been to Calgary. It sure is a beautiful area up there. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. A fan on social media wanted to ask about your experience, speaking of legends, working with Bullet Bob Armstrong.
Bob was a great, great guy. Even in and out of the ring, what a family man he was. He was very smart to the business. All 4 of his sons, I got to know very well. Scott, James, and Brian, and Brad, and Steve, all of them. Bob was a class act. If there was any problem or issues that I had, because he owned part of the territory Southeastern, Bob was always in a room by himself, and always you'd knock on the door and walk in. Bob always said no matter what time it was or when the ring time was, he always gave you a minute to tell you what he thought and how he portrayed of what the show should go. And I always respected that. Bob he's a class act.
You said obviously then your decision to leave was family based and you wanted to have a family. Do you have any regrets about not maybe staying in the business in some capacity, or were you just happy to get out at that moment?
I look back on it, I wish I would have stayed in the business like Jake and Arn and all these guys and Rick and all that told me, said, Jeff, I just wish you had stayed in the business because you would have had one hell of a run in WWF with Andre and Hulk Hogan and all those guys. And I could have been in the Hall of Fame with those guys. If I just stayed with the business a few more years, I wish I would have now. And because it upsets me because I see a lot of guys that I know and they're great guys and I'm proud of them. I'm proud for them and I'm glad I was part of their life. I just wish I would have stayed in it just a few more years. I do have regrets about that. Yes.
Yeah, you were there at the right time to. Do do one of the monster heel runs with Hogan, like One Man Gang and so many others. You certainly had the size, and you hit that for the 80s. You were the perfect performer for WWF. But aside from when you left, did you ever consider or have any feelers to any other organization? I'm thinking of NWA or WCW, or you just left and that was that?
Only thing I wish I could have went at was WWF. But when I left, I just decided to walk away, and I actually entered police academy in Florida and became a police law enforcement officer at Pensacola Police Department. So I regret that, but I enjoyed my time with it, in law enforcement.
And the pension is good.
Well, it's nice, that's for sure.
No pension in the wrestling.
No, and I was talking to Scott now that if you're in the business for a certain period of time now, I guess they have a little bit of pension, but not much. That's why you see a lot of guys like Jake and everybody. He was telling me they got to do a lot of Comic Cons and shows and reunions and things. So I made a smart decision that way for the long run, but at the same time, I wish I had just stayed in long enough to be in the WWF Hall of Fame. That makes sense?
Yeah. The only blessing about Comic Cons and autograph signings is for these guys, it's like a reunion every time, because they all get to come back together and get paid, and they don't have to put their bodies on the line and just sign a few autographs,
That's true. I mean, there's a couple of times I got to a couple individuals, promoters who wanted to sell my gimmick and sell me, and they flew me to Albany, New York a couple of years ago, and I went to Charlotte, North Carolina, like last year or so, to do a show. Not a show, it was just to sign autographs and sell some of my pictures and shirts and T-shirts and stuff. So I do enjoy doing that. It's amazing. And I'm very honored. I got put into the Hall of Fame in Alabama for wrestling. I'm very honored by that.
So you're available for autograph bookings?
Oh, without a doubt, I'm most definitely available for autograph bookings. And I like to sell T-shirts, and I got this little gimmick I have: T-shirts, hats, pictures, and I have a little doll. Jake the Snake put me on the Gabby.com. They sell little dolls, but make it little humongous dolls, kind of cute.
If you had to boil down your career, your tenure in pro wrestling to aside from the obvious that you had a lot of success, unusually, even back then, a lot of success in a brief period of time, what would you consider your most endearing to yourself accomplishment, or what are you most proud of?
I'm very proud of the fact that I was just part of the time in my life. I came along at a time where like Jerry Lawler gave me an opportunity to who I was. Now they gave me the opportunity, but a lot of you had to step into the shoes and do it yourself. I was very grateful for that. Austin Idol helped me out tremendously. Ron Fuller is a tremendous. Bob Armstrong, Bill Watts. I can't say enough. I think the greatest accomplishment I had was when I was with Ron Fuller's territory, and then Bill Watts. But I don't want to take anything away from Dick the Bruiser and in that area as well, because I learned so much and was taught so much by so many different people, like great guys in the business. Abdullah Butcher, I understand he's going through some health issues right now. He taught me a lot. Bobo Brazil, and Jimmy Valiant. I mean, there's so many great people that that's the problem with nowadays. These kids, I don't think they want to learn. They don't want to sit down and listen. They think they know it all. Me, I sit down with these guys and like Terry Taylor and even though he might have been a jerk a little bit, but I still listen to him, Dennis Conley, Rick Gibson, and Jimmy Hines, all those wonderful, wonderful guys.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff, if fans want to keep in touch with you on social media and have a look at some of that merch that you're referring to, where's the best place to find you online?
I do it on actually Humongous. I have a Lord Humongous website on Facebook, and then Jeff Van Camp on just on Facebook. Jeff Van Camp. You can catch me on Facebook, or I have a fans dedicated Lord Humongous Facebook page as well.
That's awesome. Well, Jeff, thank you for coming on to the Cheap Heat Productions Pro Wrestling Podcast. Appreciate your time. We'll get the word out about how the fans can keep in touch with you and access that merch and any signings that you have coming up. And we'd like to do this again if you become available in the future.
Oh, without a doubt. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be a part of it. And thank you so much for allowing me to speak to you and all the fans. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jeff.
Well, fans, that's it for this edition of the Cheap Heat Productions Pro Wrestling Podcast. If you haven't already, please click that subscribe button, like the videos, and we will catch you next time.